A brutal cop attack, a loyal dog gunned down, a Delta Force soldier with nothing left to lose. They thought he was just another victim. They were wrong. Justice is coming. Watch the full story and see how one man takes down the corrupt system that tried to destroy him. Like and subscribe to never miss a story. When justice is a lie. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the quiet streets of Redwood Heights, a neighborhood that looked peaceful on the surface, but had an undercurrent of fear. Nathan Carter walked at a steady pace, his combat boots scuffing lightly against the pavement. In his right hand, he held the leash of Rex, his 6-year-old German shepherd, his protector, his only family. The dog moved in perfect sync with him, ears perked, always alert. Nathan had lived in this neighborhood for 2 years. He had bought his home with the money he earned serving overseas. A simple life was all he wanted now. No more war, no more violence. But no matter how much he tried to blend in, he always felt the weight of watchful eyes on him. A car slowed at the corner, the hum of its engine breaking the quiet evening. Nathan had seen this before. A police cruiser. It rolled toward him at a deliberately slow pace. The moment it reached him, the red and blue lights flickered on. "Evening, sir." Nathan stopped, turned slightly, keeping his hands relaxed, his stance neutral. Ryan Calloway, a thick-set cop with graying hair and a smirk that reeked of authority, leaned against the open window. His partner, Jacob Miller, stepped out of the passenger side, heavy boots crunching on the pavement. Nathan had seen these two before. He knew their type. Men who carried their badges like shields of untouchable power. Men who ruled this neighborhood with fear, not law. "You live around here?" Calloway asked, tilting his head slightly, pretending to be casual. "Yes, sir," Nathan responded without hesitation. Calloway's smirk twitched, as if he hadn't expected that automatic respect. Men like him thrived off defiance. "That's funny," Calloway mused, his tone too light, too amused. "Don't think I've seen you before." Nathan offered a polite nod. "I travel for work, security contracting overseas. Just got back a few days ago." Miller scoffed, shaking his head. "Security contracting. That's a fancy way of saying mercenary, ain't it?" Nathan chuckled, as if the insult didn't faze him. "Not quite," he said, keeping his voice friendly. "Private security. I consult for agencies, train teams for emergency response." Calloway nodded slowly, but there was something behind his expression that made Nathan's gut tighten. "Well," Calloway shifted, "we got a call about someone suspicious walking around the neighborhood. Figured we'd check it out." Nathan's brow lifted slightly. "I see. Didn't realize walking my dog was suspicious." Calloway smirked. "You'd be surprised what makes people nervous these days." Miller took a slow step closer, his gaze dropping to Rex, who stood calmly beside Nathan, muscles taut, ready. "That's a big dog," Miller said, feigning interest. "Trained?" Nathan didn't answer immediately. He knew where this was going. "Yes, sir. Very disciplined." Miller nodded like he was weighing the words. Then Calloway shifted gears. "Gonna need to see some ID." Nathan didn't blink. He could ask why. He could refuse. He could stand his ground. But he knew exactly what kind of men these were. "Of course." His voice remained smooth, controlled. Moving slowly, always slowly, he reached into his jacket for his wallet. Rex tensed. Nathan felt the dog's subtle shift, the almost imperceptible growl that only someone trained would notice. He wasn't the only one who noticed. Calloway's eyes flicked to the dog, and Nathan didn't miss the way his fingers twitched near his belt. "Whoa there," Miller muttered, his voice sharper now. "You might want to keep that thing under control." Nathan's jaw tightened just slightly, but his voice stayed level. "Rex is fine. He's well trained." Calloway chuckled under his breath. "Yeah, we'll see about that." Something about the way he said it made Nathan's stomach tighten. It was the tone, the unspoken promise of what was coming next. Nathan pulled out his wallet, holding it up carefully. Calloway barely glanced at it before waving his hand dismissively. "Nah, I think we're going to need you to step over here for a second." Miller cracked his neck. "Just a few questions. Won't take long." Nathan exhaled slowly, carefully. "Don't give them an excuse." He gave Rex's leash the lightest tug, signaling the command to stand down. Then he stepped forward, And that was when everything changed. Nathan moved with deliberate calm, extending his wallet for them to take. His stance was steady, unthreatening. But Rex sensed something different. The officer's body language had shifted, the tension in their shoulders, the way their hands hovered closer to their belts. They weren't here to talk. Miller grabbed Nathan's wallet with unnecessary force, flipping it open like he expected to find something damning inside. Well, look at that, Miller mused, shaking his head. We got ourselves a real-life soldier. Calloway took the wallet, barely glancing at it. Delta Force, huh? His voice dripped with mockery. That's supposed to mean something. Nathan didn't react. He had learned long ago that men like this wanted a reaction, craved it, fed off it. It means I served, he said evenly. Now I work in security consulting, as I mentioned earlier. Calloway handed the wallet back, forcing Nathan to step forward to take it. A power play. Nathan took it, tucking it into his jacket without breaking eye contact. Calloway folded his arms. You know how it is, he said, his smirk widening. Folks around here get nervous when they see someone they don't think belongs. They weren't even pretending anymore. Nathan's expression remained unreadable. I do belong. I live here. Yeah? Calloway stepped just slightly closer. Then you won't mind answering a few more questions, would you? Nathan didn't move. I believe I already have. Miller scoffed, adjusting his belt. I don't know, Calloway. Something about his attitude don't sit right with me. Guy seems a little tense, don't you think? Calloway smirked. Yeah, almost like he's got something to hide. Nathan took a slow breath. He had been in more hostile situations than he could count, had faced warlords, insurgents, men with bombs strapped to their chests. Yet in all those years, he had never felt this level of restraint tightening around him like a vice. Because here in his own country, in the very place he had fought to protect, he wasn't seen as a citizen. He was a threat, and Rex knew it. That was when Miller moved first, and everything went to hell. A soldier with nothing left to lose. The moment Miller's hand clamped onto Nathan's wrist, Rex reacted. It wasn't an attack. It was a trained, split-second response. A low warning growl, a tensing of muscle, a flicker of movement. That was all they needed. Miller panicked. The gunshot ripped through the evening air. Boom. Nathan didn't hear the gunfire so much as feel it. A concussive blast that sent a shockwave straight into his chest. Then, the leash jerked violently in his hand. Rex let out a single, strangled whimper. Nathan turned just in time to see his dog, his best friend, crumple to the ground. For a moment the world slowed. The look in Rex's eyes, the way his legs faltered, the sudden, horrifying stillness that followed. Then, chaos. Nathan barely had time to react before Calloway's baton smashed into the side of his head. His vision exploded with light, then darkened. Hands grabbed him. Boots slammed into his ribs. Voices shouted, "Stop resisting!" Nathan wasn't resisting, but they weren't listening. A knee drove into his spine, shoving him face first onto the pavement. Blood from his forehead mixed with Rex's. He was cuffed before he even realized what was happening. The only thing he could hear, the ragged, fading breaths of his dog. Nathan turned his head just in time to see Rex take his final breath. Then he went still. Something inside Nathan snapped. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was something colder, darker. Calloway knelt beside him, leaning in close, voice thick with amusement. "That's on you, big guy. Should have controlled your damn dog." Nathan's breathing slowed. A soldier's breathing, a man counting down the seconds until he took everything from them. The arrest. Nathan barely felt the cuffs bite into his wrists as he was shoved into the back of the patrol car. Miller slid into the front seat, still shaken, his hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. Calloway laughed. Well, Mr. Delta Force, thought you'd be a little tougher than that." Nathan didn't respond. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared straight ahead. Calloway's smirk faltered. For the first time he felt it, the silence of a man who had nothing left to lose. The station. Nathan sat in holding, blood dried on his face, his ribs aching from the baton strikes. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Officers walked past the cell, glancing at him like he was just another arrest, just another case file. He sat there for 4 hours. Then the door slammed open. A woman in a tailored navy blue power suit stormed in, her heels striking the tile like gunfire. Jessica Carter, Nathan's sister, one of the top defense attorneys in the state, and she was pissed. "You are going to release my brother right now, or I swear to God I will burn this entire department to the ground." The officer behind the desk shifted uncomfortably. Jessica slammed a folder onto the desk. Legal paperwork, signed orders, a lawsuit ready to go. Calloway and Miller, standing off to the side, looked less amused now. "Relax, sweetheart," Calloway drawled. "We were just having a conversation." Jessica turned so fast her hair barely had time to catch up. "A conversation?" she repeated, voice dripping with venom. "You shot his dog. You beat him in the street. You arrested him for what exactly? Walking his own damn neighborhood?" Miller leaned against the doorway, grinning. "He got aggressive, ma'am. Had to make sure things didn't escalate." Jessica let out a short, sharp laugh. "Oh, you're gonna regret those words." She turned back to the officer behind the desk. "Let him go." There was a long, tense silence. Then, the click of a lock. Nathan stood, stepping out of the cell. Jessica immediately looked him over, eyes sharp, scanning for injuries, for hidden damage. She turned back to Calloway and Miller. "This isn't over." Calloway just smirked. "It could have been worse." Nathan's jaw clenched. He memorized those words. The aftermath, they drove home in silence. Nathan sat in the passenger seat, his fingers twitching at his sides, his body still coiled with something dangerous. Jessica finally spoke. "Nathan, you need to let me handle this." Nathan didn't respond. She kept going. "I have connections, reporters, watchdogs, lawyers. We can file a case, push the media, make them pay for this the right way." "It won't work." Jessica hesitated. Nathan turned to her, voice quiet. "They own the system, the cops, the courts, everything. You and I both know how this plays out. They get a slap on the wrist. Maybe they get suspended for a few weeks. Maybe they walk away with a settlement. And then they go right back to doing what they've always done." Jessica's fingers curled into fists. "So what, Nathan? You're just going to let them get away with it?" Nathan exhaled, slow, measured, controlled. "No." He turned to her, his dark eyes steady, unshakable. "I'm going to handle it my way." Jessica froze. "Nathan, don't. Go home, Jess. You know what this will lead to. You know how this ends." Nathan opened the door and stepped out. He turned back, meeting his sister's pleading gaze. "They took everything from me in a matter of seconds." His voice was low, even, final. "Now I'm going to take everything from them." Then he shut the door and disappeared into the night. A reckoning unleashed. The night swallowed Nathan Carter whole. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. This wasn't revenge. This was war. The hunt begins. Nathan spent the next 3 days doing what he did best, studying his enemy. Calloway and Miller weren't just dirty cops. They were predictable. Calloway was a creature of habit. He drank at the same bar every Thursday and Saturday, always stumbling out around midnight, always using the same back alley to get to his car. Miller was different, paranoid, twitchy. He carried himself like a man who expected a fight. He never went anywhere alone, but he always took the same route home from the station. Nathan had fought cartels, terrorists, warlords. These two? They weren't soldiers. They were bullies, and bullies only understood one thing. The first strike, Calloway, Saturday night. Nathan waited in the alley behind the bar, his breathing steady, his mind sharp. Every nerve was controlled. At exactly 12:17 a.m., the back door creaked open. Calloway stumbled out, half drunk, humming a song. He fumbled for his keys, swaying slightly. Nathan moved like a shadow. 1 step, 2 steps. Then he struck. A brutal, precise kick to the ribs sent Calloway crashing against the brick wall. The air left his lungs in a sharp, choked gasp. Before he could recover, Nathan grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the cold stone. Calloway's dazed eyes flickered with something Nathan had been waiting for. Fear. "What? Who the f—" Nathan cut him off with a vicious punch to the stomach. Calloway doubled over, gagging. Nathan leaned in close, his voice low, controlled, deadly. You don't get to know who I am. Another punch, this time to the jaw. Calloway spat blood onto the pavement, his hands scrambling for his belt. Too slow. Nathan grabbed his wrist and twisted. Hard. A sharp, sickening pop filled the alley. Calloway screamed. Nathan shoved him against the wall, pressing a knee into his spine. You like being the one in control, don't you? Nathan whispered. Screw you, Calloway spat, his voice shaky. Nathan tightened his grip. Wrong answer. Another strike, quick, surgical. Calloway collapsed onto the pavement, groaning. Nathan crouched beside him. This is just the beginning. Then he disappeared into the night. The second strike. Nathan didn't give Miller time to process what happened to Calloway. He came for him the next night. Miller had been drinking heavily. He was nervous, on edge. He was heading toward his car in a dimly lit parking lot. Nathan followed him, silent, patient, unseen. He let Miller take a few more steps before speaking. Long night? Miller froze. His entire body tensed. Slowly he turned. The moment he recognized Nathan, his face twisted in shock. Then panic. His fingers twitched toward his gun. Nathan moved first. A brutal, calculated punch shattered Miller's nose. Crack. Blood gushed down his face. He stumbled, tried to grab his weapon. Nathan knocked it away with a swift kick. Not so brave now, are you? Nathan murmured. Miller tried to swing wildly, but Nathan ducked, then drove a fist straight into his ribs. Miller collapsed. Nathan crouched beside him. You remember me, don't you? Miller coughed, his breath shaky, ragged. Nathan tightened his grip on Miller's collar. You shot my dog. Miller's eyes widened. He remembered. Nathan let that fear sink in before landing a final, devastating strike to the gut. Then he walked away. The unexpected backlash. Nathan had expected retaliation, but not like this. Calloway and Miller didn't just try to find him. They went after Jessica. Nathan got the call 2 days later. Nathan, it's Jess. The sound of a struggle, a muffled scream. Then the line went dead. A cold, terrifying silence filled the room. Nathan's pulse slowed, his muscles coiled. They wanted to play dirty. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Nathan reached under his bed, pulled out the weapons case he had sworn he'd never use again. Inside, a Glock 19, a combat knife, and a burner phone. This wasn't a game anymore. They took the wrong person, and Nathan was about to remind them why the military called him a ghost. The rescue. Nathan moved like a predator. He tracked Jessica's phone. It led him to an abandoned warehouse outside the city. Nathan didn't wait. He moved through the shadows. 2 guards stood outside. Nathan took them down without a sound. Inside, Jessica was tied to a chair, bruised but alive. Miller stood over her. Calloway leaned against the table, arms crossed, a smug grin on his face. You really thought we wouldn't fight back? Calloway sneered. Nathan stepped forward. You shouldn't have touched her. Calloway laughed. Or what? Nathan answered with a gunshot. A warning shot, right between Calloway's feet. The smile vanished from his face. Untie her! Nathan's voice was lethal. Miller went for his gun. Nathan didn't hesitate. He disarmed him in seconds, smashing his face into the table. Calloway lunged. Nathan sidestepped easily, slamming an elbow into his jaw. They weren't fighters. They were prey. Calloway staggered back, blood dripping from his mouth. You're a dead man, Carter. Nathan cocked the gun. No! His voice was ice cold. You are. The police stormed the warehouse minutes later. Jessica had called them on a second phone. Calloway and Miller were arrested. Nathan stood over them as the cuffs were snapped onto their wrists. Calloway's eyes burned with rage. Miller trembled with fear. Nathan crouched down one last time. This is the last time you'll ever hurt anyone. Then he stepped back, watching them disappear forever. Justice served. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, every camera focused, every journalist waiting for the moment that would define the end of an era. At the center of it all, Nathan Carter. He sat in the witness stand, his posture straight, his eyes cold. Across from him, Ryan Calloway and Jacob Miller sat at the defense table. Their uniforms were gone, their badges stripped, their power was gone, and they knew it. The trial begins. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman in a navy blue suit, stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, can you state your full name for the record?" Nathan's voice was steady. "Nathan James Carter." "And your occupation?" "Former United States Army, Delta Force. Currently private security consulting." A ripple moved through the jury. Even the judge sat up slightly at that. The prosecutor nodded. "Mr. Carter, can you walk us through the night of March 4th? Nathan's jaw tightened. "I was walking my dog, Rex. We had just gotten back from a job overseas. It was late, quiet. Then I noticed headlights behind me." The jury listened intently. The car slowed down. It was a police cruiser. His voice never wavered. Officers Calloway and Miller stepped out. "They told me I looked suspicious." The prosecutor's tone sharpened. "Did they have a reason to stop you?" Nathan locked eyes with Calloway across the room. "No." A heavy pause. "What happened next?" Nathan exhaled. "They asked for my ID. I gave it to them. They made comments about my military service. Then Miller reached for me. My dog reacted." He paused, swallowing the rage threatening to resurface. "And then Miller shot him." The courtroom fell silent, a long, suffocating silence that hung thick in the air. The prosecutor took a step closer. "He shot your dog, unprovoked." Nathan's jaw clenched. "Yes." A murmur moved through the courtroom. The jury shifted. Some of them looked sick. The prosecutor nodded. "And after that?" Nathan leaned forward slightly. "They beat me, threw me to the ground, tased me, arrested me for nothing." The prosecutor turned to the jury. "An innocent man, brutalized in his own neighborhood." She let the words linger. Then she turned back to Nathan. "And a few days later, what happened?" Nathan's voice darkened. "They came to my home, no warrant, no cause. They forced their way inside and attacked me again." She nodded toward the screen. "And do we have evidence of that?" Nathan's expression didn't change. "Yes." The prosecutor pressed play. The footage played in front of the entire courtroom. Calloway and Miller, forcing their way into Nathan's home. The beating, the threats, the power trip. The jury watched, horrified. Nathan didn't blink. He had lived it. When the video ended, the prosecutor turned to the jury. "Do these look like officers of the law to you?" Silence. Then she turned back to Nathan. "Do you believe Calloway and Miller should be held responsible for their actions?" Nathan's gaze didn't waver. "Yes." "Why?" His answer was razor sharp. "Because they are criminals." The words landed like a hammer. Miller flinched. Calloway clenched his jaw. The prosecutor nodded, stepping back. No further questions. The verdict. The jury only needed 2 hours. The judge returned to the bench, looking down at Calloway and Miller. "In the matter of the state versus Ryan Calloway and Jacob Miller, on the charge of excessive force, guilty. On the charge of illegal search and seizure, guilty. On the charge of aggravated assault, guilty. On the charge of attempted murder, guilty." The room erupted. Miller's face went pale. Calloway slammed his fists against the table. "You can't do this," he snarled. The judge's voice cut through the chaos. "You abused your power. You violated the public trust. And when confronted with your crimes, you showed no remorse." A pause. "For these reasons, I hereby sentence Ryan Calloway and Jacob Miller to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." Miller let out a strangled noise. Calloway stared in disbelief. It was over. They were done. The judge banged the gavel. "Court is adjourned." The aftermath, Nathan stepped out of the courthouse. The cameras swarmed, reporters shouting, flashing microphones in his face. "Mr. Carter, do you feel like justice was served? Do you have anything to say to the officers who were sentenced today?" Nathan paused. He looked directly into the camera lens. His voice was calm. "They got what they deserved." Then he walked away. The final visit. The cemetery was quiet. The air was crisp. The sun was setting. Nathan crouched in front of Rex's grave. He placed a single military dog tag beside the headstone. His fingers brushed against the cool stone. "It's done, buddy." The wind shifted. The trees rustled. For the first time in months, Nathan felt a strange sense of peace. He stood, exhaling slowly. He didn't say goodbye. Instead, he turned and walked away, ready for whatever came next.